The key rule is crystal clear, she snarled, her eyes burning. That pool is a shared amenity. He stood firm, a smirk on his face. This isn't your amenity. It's my private property. As her hand reached for the phone, her voice dropped to a whisper. You haven't read the addendum, have you, Mr. Grayson? The sunlight hit the surface of the pool, fracturing the blue into a million dazzling shards. To Alex Grayson, it wasn't just a pool. It was the crown jewel of his new life. After a decade of grinding in the tech sector, this house was his reward, a fortress of solitude and modern luxury. The smart home system he'd integrated managed everything from the ambient lighting to the self-cleaning saltwater chlorinator he'd personally installed. This was his sanctuary, a slice of paradise in the suburban sprawl. He floated on his back, eyes closed, the gentle sloshing of the water a rhythmic, soothing sound. The perfect day was only interrupted by the sharp crunch of gravel on the patio stone. He opened one eye. A woman stood at the edge of the deck, clutching a clipboard like it was a sacred scroll. Her perfectly coiffed blonde hair and crisp white polo shirt screamed, HOA. A chill ran through him, colder than the pool water. Mr. Grayson? She asked, her voice a saccharine melody that couldn't quite hide the steel underneath. Alex pushed himself to the side, gripping the edge. Can I help you? I'm Patricia Vance, head of the Pine Ridge Homeowners Association, she announced, her posture rigid with self-importance. I was hoping to have a word with you about your pool. A flicker of a smile played on Alex's lips. He'd read the bylaws front to back before closing on the house. The pool was a private, detached feature, explicitly excluded from the HOA's jurisdiction over shared community assets. He'd even consulted his real estate lawyer to be sure. He hoisted himself out of the water, a towel wrapped around his waist. He walked to the edge of the pool, water dripping from his chest onto the warm stone. It's a great pool, he said, playing it cool. It was one of the main selling points. State-of-the-art filtration, energy-efficient pumps, the works. I even set up an automated chemical balance system. Patricia's smile didn't waver, but her eyes narrowed slightly. Yes, we're all very proud of the amenities available to the residents of Pine Ridge. That's why I'm here. We've received a number of inquiries about the new community asset, and I'm here to conduct a preliminary inspection. Alex's playful demeanor vanished. Excuse me? A community asset? This is my private pool, Ms. Vance. It's in my fenced-in backyard. It came with the property deed. I understand your confusion, she said, her tone condescending as if speaking to a child. But according to Addendum 7, subsection B of the most recent bylaws, any new recreational water feature, pool, hot tub, or otherwise, must be made available for community use to prevent redundant infrastructure. Alex laughed, a short, sharp burst of disbelief. That's absurd and completely false. I read the bylaws and the addendums. There's no such clause. The only mention of pools is for the main community pool, which I believe is a mile down the road. Patricia's smile finally cracked. Her lips thinned into a hard line. Are you calling me a liar, Mr. Grayson? I'm calling your interpretation of the bylaws a bit creative, Alex said, his tone turning cold. He walked over to a small table near the lounge chairs, picking up his phone. He swiped through it until he found the PDF of his closing documents. Look, I have the full deed here, and my purchase agreement. Both explicitly list the pool as a private feature, conveyed with the title of the home. There's no easement, no shared use agreement, nothing. She stepped forward, her heels clicking on the stone. You're new here, so I'll be patient. The previous owner was elderly and didn't participate in community affairs. We, however, are a close-knit group. We share resources. It saves everyone money on utilities and maintenance. My pool runs on my electricity and my water, and I paid for the maintenance system myself, Alex retorted. I'm not sharing it. I bought this place for my privacy, and that's what I intend to have. Her face flushed, and the saccharine tone was gone completely, replaced by pure, unadulterated rage. This is a clear violation of your agreement with the association. You are disrupting the community's harmony. What are you hiding, Mr. Grayson? Why do you have such a problem with your neighbors enjoying a little dip in the pool on a hot day? Because it's a private pool, Patricia, he said, using her first name to emphasize the sudden intimacy of the fight. I'm not a public bathhouse. And I don't know any of these people. You will, she hissed. You'll know them when the fines start rolling in. Fines for what? Exercising my property rights? For violating the community use agreement you signed, she shouted, her voice echoing off the stucco walls of the house. We can levy a fine for every day you deny access to this shared asset. It could bankrupt you. Alex's hand tightened on his phone. This was no longer a simple misunderstanding. This was a direct, aggressive assault on his property and his financial security. He had to document this. He discreetly pressed the record button on his phone's camera. This conversation is being recorded, he stated calmly, holding the phone up slightly. The sight of the phone sent Patricia into a frenzy. Her eyes widened and a guttural cry escaped her throat. She dropped her clipboard, the papers scattering in the breeze. She lunged forward, her hand outstretched, not to retrieve her papers, but to snatch the phone from his grip. You have no right to film me, she shrieked. That is a violation of my privacy. Give me that phone. Alex, caught off guard by the sheer velocity of her lunge, stepped back. He stumbled over a decorative garden gnome he'd bought as a joke, its tiny hat sending him off balance. He flailed his arms, but his foot landed squarely on a slick, mossy patch of stone. He lost his footing, his phone flying from his hand and arcing through the air. It wasn't his phone that mattered, though. It was the frantic, panicked look in Patricia's eyes as she watched it sail past her, landing with a soft plop and an agonizing splash in the deep end of the pool. The air went silent, the only sound the gurgle of bubbles rising from the depths. Her face, a mask of fury just moments before, was now a portrait of pure, unadulterated horror. She wasn't looking at his phone. She was looking at the phone still clutched in her other hand, her own, its screen now dark and lifeless. You think this is just about a pool, Mr. Grayson? She whispered, her voice trembling with an unnerving mixture of fear and rage. You think you can win a fight against the entire board? You haven't seen the final notice, the one that came yesterday. The one that invalidates your entire property inspection unless your pool is fully compliant with community regulations. The one that says you can't sell this house unless a full community use pass has been issued. The sun was still high and bright, but a cold shadow had fallen over Alex's manicured backyard. The frantic, panicked look on Patricia's face as she watched her own phone sync was a far cry from the smug, saccharine smile she had arrived with. Her final words, whispered with an unnerving mixture of fear and rage, hung in the air like a final damning curse. This wasn't a property dispute. This was a war, and the first battle had just ended with a stalemate and a chilling revelation. The silence was broken only by the gentle filter hum of the pool's skimmer. Alex stood on the wet stone, water from his towel-wrapped waist still beading and dripping. He looked from his own submerged phone, a small black rectangle in the crystal-clear water, to Patricia's, a white gleam near the drain at the bottom of the deep end. Her face was pale, her composure completely shattered. She wasn't looking at the phones. Her gaze was fixed on the gurgle of the filter, as if listening for something that only she could hear. "What did you just say?" Alex asked, his voice low and tight. He knew what she said. He just needed to confirm the insanity of it. Patricia blinked, her eyes finally finding his. The terror was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating resolve. The predator was back, but now it was a wounded, desperate one. "I said you have no recourse." "That's what you think, isn't it? You think you can film me, you can sue the association, you can stand here and deny your neighbors a simple courtesy. You're just another self-important nobody who thinks he's above the rules." "I am not above the law," Alex corrected, his voice hardening. "I am standing on the law. My property deed is my law. Your addendum, this final notice, it's all just a bluff. You made it up." She let out a short, hollow laugh. "You're a tech guy, aren't you? You think everything is a code you can crack, but this isn't code. This is a community. We protect our community. And sometimes that means making sure a new resident doesn't come in and try to disrupt things." Alex took a step forward, the water squishing under his feet. "Get off my property, Patricia, now!" She didn't move. She took a step closer, too, her eyes boring into his. "You'll see, Mr. Grayson. You'll go inside, you'll look at your documents, and you'll realize you made a grave mistake. The ink is still fresh on the paper. You haven't had a chance to look yet, have you? You were too busy moving in, weren't you? That's what we counted on. A knot of dread tightened in Alex's stomach. He hadn't thought about the final notice she'd mentioned, a document that supposedly arrived yesterday. He'd been so absorbed in unpacking the boxes that lined his garage, setting up his smart home network, and enjoying the first full day in his pool that he'd barely touched his mail. He'd probably seen it, a thick envelope from the HOA, and tossed it on a pile with the junk mail and utility bills, thinking it was just more welcome information. "Get out!" Alex said again, a tremor in his voice. "Before I call the police." Patricia finally smiled. It wasn't the saccharine smile from before, or the rage-filled snarl. It was a victory smile, cold and triumphant. "You do that, Mr. Grayson. They'll just tell you this is a civil matter. And by the time you've hired a lawyer, you'll owe us thousands. A few fines, a few liens, and maybe a lawsuit for damages. You might own the pool, but the HOA owns the water in it now, figuratively speaking." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking a rhythmic, sinister beat on the stone path. She didn't look back as she picked up the scattered papers from her clipboard, not bothering to collect her now useless phone from the bottom of the pool. The moment she disappeared around the side of the house, the perfect, sunny day seemed to lose its warmth. Alex stood there for a long moment, the water from the pool feeling suddenly heavy and cold. He glanced at his phone, still in its submerged state, and a wave of relief washed over him. The phone was a rugged, waterproof model, built for his frequent kayaking and hiking trips. It would be fine. But what about the recording? The fear that the file might be corrupted gnawed at him. And the deeper fear, what if Patricia wasn't bluffing? He strode to the edge of the pool, fished his phone out of the water, and held it in his hand. The screen lit up instantly, showing the clock app. He swiped to the photo album and found the video file. It was there. The full conversation from her first arrival to her final chilling pronouncement. He also noticed that she was still on his patio. He watched through his phone camera as she stood with her car door open, talking with a man. He zoomed in on his camera. His heart stopped. The man was his next-door neighbor, a quiet man who had waved from his yard the day before. The man had a strange, menacing expression. He was holding something that looked like a deed and pointing it towards Alex's house. Alex felt a cold wave of realization wash over him. This wasn't just a dispute with Patricia. This was a carefully planned, deliberate act. The final notice was just the latest maneuver in a long game to take over his property. He had walked right into a trap, and they were all in on it. He was now alone and outnumbered in a quiet, friendly-looking suburban neighborhood that was anything but. The reality of the situation hit Alex with the force of a physical blow. He stood in the driveway, the waterproof phone a solid, cold weight in his hand, watching his quiet, unassuming neighbor, Mr. Harrison, hand Patricia Vance a document. The menacing look on Harrison's face, the pointing gesture towards Alex's house, it was a confirmation of his darkest suspicion. This wasn't a random dispute. This was an ambush, a coordinated effort. The perfect suburban life he'd just bought was a facade, hiding a hostile conspiracy. He retreated inside, the front door closing with a click that felt less like a seal of security and more like the latching of a cage door. The pristine, sun-drenched foyer, with its high ceilings and polished tile, now felt hollow. The echo of his footsteps seemed to mock him. He was no longer just the owner of a new house. He was the target. He went directly to the kitchen island where the day's mail lay in a chaotic pile. Utility bills, junk mail, and right in the middle, a thick, official-looking envelope from the Pine Ridge Homeowners Association. It was sealed with a sticker of the association's logo, a stylized pine tree, and addressed directly to him. The ink was a fresh, deep black, just as Patricia had hinted. With trembling hands, he tore it open. Inside were a series of documents. The first was a "Welcome to the Neighborhood" letter, all cheerful fonts and friendly platitudes. The second, however, was titled Notice of Intent to Impose Fines and Liens. The language was cold, legalistic, and utterly damning. It cited Addendum 7, subsection B, the very clause Patricia had quoted. It stated that as of yesterday, the day before he even had a chance to check his mail, his property had been classified as in violation of community rules. The fines would be levied at $500 per day until the discrepancy was corrected. The final page was a formal request for an inspection to be conducted in 2 days' time to confirm compliance. The document concluded by stating that failure to grant access would result in additional fines and ultimately a lien on the property. It even contained a clause that the deed would not be transferable until all community liens were satisfied. He was trapped. Alex's mind raced. He had read the deed. He had read the bylaws. His lawyer had reviewed everything. How could this be? He pulled out his laptop and frantically searched his email for the digital copies of his closing documents. He opened the PDF of the bylaws he'd received from his lawyer. He scrolled through it, his eyes scanning for Addendum 7. It wasn't there. There was no mention of pools or shared amenities in that section. A fresh wave of panic washed over him, a cold, sickening fear that turned his stomach. Was it a different version? Had the HOA changed the bylaws after the sale was finalized? He knew that wasn't right. HOA bylaws could be amended, but it required a formal vote and a notification period. He had received no such notice. He pulled up the original listing for the house. The description was still online. It clearly stated, private, in-ground pool, a rare, secluded amenity. No mention of community access. Then a thought, so simple and terrifying it made his blood run cold. What if this was a fake? A forgery so carefully crafted it felt real? But a forgery would be an amateur move. Patricia was a professional. This was a long con. This was premeditated. He grabbed his phone. The first call was to his real estate agent, a woman named Carol who had been warm and helpful throughout the process. The phone rang 3 times before going to voicemail. Alex left a terse message, his voice a tight, controlled wire. Carol, it's Alex Grayson. I just received a letter from the HOA. It mentions an addendum about my pool. It's a serious issue. I need you to call me back immediately. The next call was to his lawyer, a partner at a downtown firm. The call went to the receptionist. Mr. Harrison's not available, she said in a monotone voice. He's out of the office on a personal matter. Can you tell him it's Alex Grayson? It's an urgent matter regarding the property on Pine Ridge Lane. It's a legal emergency, Alex pleaded. I'll leave a message, she said, her voice flat. He could hear the finality in her tone. He tried again, this time calling the main number for the firm. He spoke to another receptionist, then another. No one could help. No one would put him through to a lawyer. His team, the very people who were supposed to protect him, were suddenly unreachable. Alex paced the living room, his mind a whirlwind of possibilities. The conspiracy was deeper than he thought. Patricia, the neighbor, the sudden unavailability of his lawyer. Was his lawyer in on it? That seemed too far-fetched. But in this new reality, anything was possible. He stopped, his eyes falling on the video doorbell monitor in the foyer. The little black screen showed a live feed of his front porch. He saw a man, Mr. Harrison, his neighbor, walking back from Patricia's car. He was holding the document from Patricia. It was indeed a deed. Harrison looked over his shoulder towards Alex's house, his face still contorted in that strange, menacing grimace. Then he saw a woman. She was holding a clipboard, her face completely hidden by the clipboard and the thick black folder. Alex's mind reeled. The document was a decoy. The actual document was in the possession of the neighbor. Alex took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. He was a tech guy. He lived in a world of information, of data. He had installed a state-of-the-art security system on his home. Every corner of the property, including the backyard, was monitored. The cameras recorded continuously to a local network-attached storage drive he'd set up in the basement. He didn't just have his phone recording of the confrontation with Patricia. He had the full-motion, high-definition video from his property cameras. He raced down the basement stairs, the cold concrete a stark contrast to the oppressive heat upstairs. He found his server rack and accessed the security system's interface on a tablet. He navigated to the timeline for the backyard camera, rewinding to the moment Patricia had arrived. He found the beginning of the conversation. The video was pristine, the audio clear. He watched the entire exchange unfold, from her initial polite facade to her final triumphant smile. He saw her drop her clipboard, and he saw his phone, and her phone plunge into the water. But then the video showed something that made his blood run cold. It showed a small, unassuming black car parked on the street. It was his. The driver, a figure whose face was obscured by the sun, got out of the car. He was holding something small in his hand. Alex zoomed in. It was a syringe. It was pointed directly at the main water valve. He could see the man walk up to the valve, and he could see the syringe plunge into the valve, the liquid disappearing into the water. Alex's hand tightened on the tablet, his knuckles white. The video continued. The man smiled. He was a contractor, a plumber, a trusted professional. Alex had hired him to come and check the pipes. He had even given him the access code for the lockbox for his back gate. It was the plumber who was injecting something into the water. Not his water, but the community water supply. He had even seen the plumber talk to Patricia. He wasn't smiling. He was laughing. And then he saw the car from before, a car he had only seen in his dream. It was the same one, but the license plate was different. He zoomed in. It was the same car, but this time the license plate was a fake. The man was a ghost. He didn't exist. Alex knew what he had to do. He couldn't go to the police, not yet. They would just dismiss his claims as a conspiracy theory. He had to expose this himself. He had to find out what was in the water and who this man was. He had to find out what his... Alex stared at the tablet screen, the grainy, looping video playing a silent, horrifying ballet. The man he had hired as a trusted plumber, his face obscured by the sun but his movements chillingly clear, injecting something into the main water line. The syringe was small, a needle, a dark fluid disappearing into the pipes. It was a perfect, calculated act of sabotage. This wasn't about a pool. This was about something else entirely. Something far more sinister. Rage, cold and sharp, replaced the panic. His hands, still gripping the tablet, trembled with a new purpose. He wasn't a victim. He was a witness. He was a tech guy, and he knew how to fight with information. He wasn't going to the police with a crazy story about a ghost plumber and a fake HOA addendum. He was going to build his case brick by brick, bite by bite. His first action was to secure the evidence. He connected the tablet to his main server, a custom-built machine humming quietly in the corner of the basement. He initiated a full data transfer of all video and audio files from the security system's storage drive. He created multiple encrypted backups, storing them on a handful of external hard drives and uploading them to a private cloud-based server he maintained for his work. He knew that the HOA, if they were this organized, would likely try to destroy the evidence. Next, he had to figure out what was in the water. He was a tech guy, not a chemist, but his mind worked like a problem-solving algorithm. He had a water testing kit he'd bought for the pool. It was basic, for chlorine, pH, and alkalinity, but it was a start. He went to the kitchen and drew a sample of tap water into a small, sterile container. He ran the tests. Chlorine levels were normal. pH was stable. Alkalinity was a bit low, but within a reasonable range. Nothing suspicious. The liquid must be something that didn't register on a basic kit. He needed to get a better sample, not just from his tap, but from the main line itself. He knew where the injection point was, thanks to the video. He also had a suspicion that the liquid might dissipate or bind with the water supply over time. He had to act fast. He slipped on a pair of jeans and a t-shirt, grabbed a small, sanitized syringe he'd bought for his coffee maker's cleaning solution, and headed to the main water valve in his front yard. He crouched low behind a hedge, careful to stay out of sight of his neighbor's windows. He unscrewed the cap, and with a quick, decisive movement, drew a sample of water from the valve. It looked clear, normal. He quickly capped the sample and retreated to the safety of his home. Back in his makeshift lab in the garage, he set up his makeshift analysis. He wasn't a chemist, but he was good at data analysis. He used a powerful handheld spectroscope he had for his home automation business to analyze the sample. It was a tool he used to identify various metals and compounds in electronic components. He pointed it at the water. The spectrum was clean. Nothing. He checked the filters. Nothing. He was at a loss. Then a thought. What if the liquid was designed to be undetectable? A simple but terrifying hypothesis. He had to think outside the box. He took a small amount of the water and mixed it with a common household cleaner, an all-purpose detergent. Nothing. He mixed it with a bit of vinegar. Still nothing. Then he mixed it with a small amount of baking soda. The mixture fizzed and bubbled, and then a faint, almost invisible milky white film formed on the surface. He tested the pH of the mixture. It had become highly alkaline. It was a base, a powerful one. Alex's eyes widened. He had a theory. The liquid was a highly concentrated base designed to react with a specific type of metal. What metal was common in home piping? Copper. A highly alkaline liquid would corrode and eat away at the copper pipes. It would slowly, silently, and invisibly destroy the entire community's plumbing system. The cost to replace the entire system would be astronomical, far more than the fines the HOA was levying. It was a deliberate act of sabotage, a long con. He was so focused on the water sample that he almost missed the email. It was from the HOA, a single terse message. Inspection tomorrow at 10 a.m. Failure to comply will result in immediate legal action. The clock was ticking. He had less than 24 hours to find proof, not just of the sabotage, but of who was behind it. He went back to the video. He spent hours analyzing the footage, frame by frame, using advanced video analysis software he used for his company. He enhanced the images of the plumber's face, trying to get a clear shot. But the sun was too bright. The face was just a blur of features. He couldn't get a clear facial recognition match. He tried to get a better shot of the license plate, but it was a blur of mismatched numbers and letters. It was a fake. He then tried a different approach. He had a network of contractors he worked with. He sent out a blast message to a few trusted ones, asking if they recognized the plumber or his car. He didn't mention the specifics of the situation, just that he had hired a plumber who had failed to show up. He got a few responses, but no one recognized the man or the car. He was a ghost. Alex was at a dead end. He had the video evidence, he had the water sample, and he had a terrifying theory. But he had no proof. He had no name, no identity. He had no one to go to. He was alone. He was in the middle of a mental breakdown when his doorbell rang. He checked the monitor. It wasn't Patricia. It wasn't Mr. Harrison. It was a man he had never seen before. He was tall and wore a sharp, custom-tailored suit that looked out of place in the casual suburban setting. He wasn't holding a clipboard. He was holding a large manila envelope, and his face was utterly devoid of emotion. His eyes, fixed directly on the camera, were cold and calculating. The man wasn't there to threaten or intimidate. He was there to deliver a final, crushing blow. He was there with a message, and Alex knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the message was not a letter, but a lawsuit. Alex stood frozen in the foyer, the doorbell's chime a fading echo in the silent house. On the monitor, the man in the suit waited, his face a mask of cold professionalism. He was a perfect predator, devoid of emotion, a human-shaped vessel for a legal-shaped bullet. Alex knew this wasn't an ordinary process server. This was the final piece of the puzzle, a calculated move in a game of chess he hadn't even known he was playing. He took a deep breath, his hand on the doorknob. He had two choices: refuse the papers and pretend this nightmare wasn't happening, or face it head-on. He chose the latter. He was a tech guy, a problem solver. He wasn't going to hide. He opened the door a crack, keeping his body partially shielded by the frame. Alex Grayson. The man's voice was flat, devoid of inflection. "I have some documents for you. Who are you?" Alex asked, his voice low. "My name is Marcus Thorne. I'm with the law firm of Sterling and Finch, representing the Pine Ridge Homeowners Association." He held up the manila envelope. "You are being served with a civil complaint and a temporary restraining order." Alex's mind raced. A lawsuit, he had expected. But a temporary restraining order? Against him? He took the envelope, the paper feeling heavy and cold in his hands. He didn't sign anything, just took it. Marcus Thorne didn't wait for a response. He simply turned and walked away, his stride long and unhurried, as if delivering bad news was the most mundane task in the world. He got into a sleek black sedan parked at the curb and drove away without a backward glance. Alex closed the door and leaned against it, the envelope a ticking time bomb in his hands. He tore it open and pulled out the documents. He scanned the first page, the legal jargon a swirling vortex of accusations. It wasn't a lawsuit for fines. It was a suit for fraudulent misrepresentation. The complaint alleged that Alex had purchased the property with the express, premeditated intent to disrupt the established harmony of the community. It claimed that he had presented forged documents to the HOA board, specifically a fake deed and a fake addendum, in order to bypass the HOA's authority. The complaint demanded a full transfer of the property back to the previous owner, Mr. Harrison, and a full reimbursement for all legal fees, plus damages, totaling a staggering $250,000. Alex's stomach dropped. This wasn't a defense. This was an attack. They weren't just trying to get control of his pool. They were trying to take his entire home. The lawsuit was a masterstroke of legal jujitsu, turning his protestations of innocence into evidence of guilt. The lawsuit argued that his refusal to grant access to the pool, his filming of Patricia, and his general hostile attitude were all proof of his fraudulent intent. It was a total inversion of reality. He flipped through the documents, his heart pounding. The final pages were the most damning. They were sworn affidavits from his real estate agent, Carol, and his lawyer, a partner named Mark Harrison, the same Mr. Harrison who he had seen Patricia with. The affidavits claimed that Alex had, on several occasions, expressed his disdain for HOA regulations and his intention to circumvent any rules that he found inconvenient. He had supposedly shown them forged documents during the closing process. Alex felt a cold, burning fury. They weren't just in on it. They were leading the charge. His own lawyer and his own real estate agent had betrayed him. They had set him up from the beginning. He was a fly in their web, and the web was far more intricate than he had ever imagined. He slammed the documents onto the kitchen counter. He was alone. His legal team was now his enemy. He couldn't go to the police. They would just see a civil dispute, a he-said-she-said between a new resident and his established neighbors, backed up by sworn testimony from his own legal and real estate representatives. The security video of the plumber, the water sample, his theory about the corrosive liquid. It was all circumstantial, unproven, and would be laughed out of any courtroom against a mountain of fraudulent but seemingly legitimate paperwork. He felt a wave of despair. They had him cornered. They had taken his property, his reputation, and now they were going for his home. He had nothing left to lose. But then, a thought, a single sharp point of light in the darkness. They had been thorough. They had thought of everything. But they had made one fatal mistake. They had underestimated him. They had assumed he was just another homeowner, another naive victim. Alex, the tech genius, the data analyst, the problem solver, knew something they didn't. He hadn't just backed up the video files. He had backed up every single file on his server, every text message, every email, every digital communication he had ever had with his lawyer and real estate agent. And he had a suspicion, a terrifying, beautiful suspicion. He had a theory that he could not only prove the documents were a forgery, he could also prove that his own lawyer and his own real estate agent had created the forgery themselves. He went to his server and he started searching. He wasn't looking for proof of their collusion. He was looking for the metadata, the digital fingerprints. He was looking for a pattern, an anomaly, a single stray byte of code that would prove his lawyer was a liar. And he found